Okay, we're here today at Brighton in the southwestern suburbs of Adelaide, and with me is Adrian Esplin from Sarah Constructions. G'day, Adrian.
Hello, Brendan.
We're down at the Minda development. Can you talk to us about this project and the need for this project?
Certainly, Brendan. Hi, everyone. Look, the need for this project has resulted from Minda requiring additional facilities for intellectually disabled. So what we're seeing is just one part of what is their 100-acre site. So what we're looking at here is actually the retirement living component. So where the need is here for Minda is that as part of the retirement living component, people come in, private purchases, purchase an apartment. What that enables Minda to do is the revenue that they receive from the apartment sales here goes into a fund which allows them to upgrade the facilities that they provide for intellectually disabled. That's as far as new workrooms, new specific accommodation for them, and we can actually show you that afterwards just very, very quickly. That was actually part of this overall redevelopment. So, and those areas are actually being completed. So they're completed and now in use. So if you look at overall the need here, it's all about providing new facilities for intellectually disabled. And what we're seeing behind us is the contribution that people who will come and live here, that provides revenue, which pays for the new facilities elsewhere on site.
Fantastic. So this site's at a really good stage of construction, where we've got things that are starting to look like in their finished form, as well as some real base building works. So as we move around different spots around site, just use your mouse, have a look around everything that we can see, you can see. Let's walk around with Adrian and have a look.
Fantastic. Just keep a close eye on some of the major areas of plant. So as you can see behind me, we've got our tower crane. That's a fixed arm crane. The reason for the selection of that fixed arm crane is the fact of its reach. So the Brighton Dunes, this apartment residential complex is quite deep in its depth. So a luffing crane would have issues getting, and a luffing crane is where the boom moves up and down, would have issues in trying to get reach. So one tower crane with a fixed arm crane has a longer boom, so we're able to get full access. In the background, you'll see somebody standing on what looks like an orange box, which is actually our hoist. That's a man and materials hoist, so during construction of the structure, that's how man and materials get up and down the building. That's now being dismantled because we've actually got the permanent lifts on the inside, now commissioned as builders lifts. So we're in a very interesting phase. Last point is the scaffold coming down off the facade. The external scaffold is obviously in place to enable final finishing of external works, and that will gradually come down as each level's finished off from top to bottom.
Fantastic. Let's have a look. Okay, we're now up the top of level 6 on the western tower of the Minda redevelopment here at Brighton. Beautiful view. Adrian, what can we see up on the top?
Thanks, Brendan. So what we're seeing around us at the moment is we're at a point of where we're into what's called first fix services. So the initial framework that you see is all the stud work that's going to be in place, which actually supports all the building, internal building fabric, such as plasterboard, etc., which forms your walls. The services and pipework, etc., that you see inside is a combination of what's being run for power, data, and all the plumbing that runs in wall. If you take it one level back, which is the initial structure, what you'll see here is that at the top floor of Brighton Dunes, the actual structure is a traditional metal roof. So you'll see the larger members that you see, universal beams, which are the main rafters, supporting obviously the purlins, with roof sheeting above that. The people that you see working as we're talking, there's key activities going on here, or a number of actually. One is the first part of the external scaffold being removed, which I spoke about earlier. So the scaffold's actually in the process of being dropped, because as you can see in the distance, the crew is working through finishing off sheeting the underside of the big roof fin. So it's very, very important in the work that we do in construction that you actually have a working platform or a deck such that you can actually reach the points where you need to work. So that's what the external scaffold's doing. You can see that there's a crew that are working on sheeting the underside of the roof in. They've got their own internal scaffold within that, a mobile scaffold. So they'll work on the mobile scaffold and then shift onto the external scaffold to get right out to the end. A couple of other interesting things. What's very important in what we do is how we manage materials. And materials is everything that comes on, as well as then the waste that's removed. So you can see the blue skip bin just over here, which is where rubbish is put in. That's then taken out to what is a loading platform. So the yellow platform where you see the gentleman standing out there at the end is actually what's called a loading bay. That's actually a retractable loading bay. So you can see there's a little dolly wheel on the main beam that supports that. So that loading bay can actually retract without having to be fully removed. What that enables is that on a multi-storey job like this, you can actually have the loading bays on each level sequentially below each other. So you're only leaving out one area of the structure to load materials in and out.
Just talking a little bit more generally about the project now, Adrian, what's the capital cost of this project?
Yeah, certainly. So the overall cost of this stage of work at Minda is 80 million, and that covers the Brighton Dunes building that we're looking at the moment, as well as the other lifestyle buildings, some specific Minda accommodation in medium density and 3-level apartments. They're quite a robust form for intellectually disabled, and 6 houses for them as well. We don't traditionally build individual standalone houses. They were part of this contract because they're quite bespoke, as in their robust nature and the services that they have in them, again, to manage intellectually disabled and people with disability.
Sure. And what type of delivery model has been used on this project?
Yeah, and the delivery model that's being used here is actually fixed lump sum. So we priced this job off of a full set of documents, and so the design's fully complete. So fixed lump sum means that we give that $80 million price, which says we build everything from out of the ground to the finished form. If there's errors or omissions in design, Minda take that risk, but we take the risk on the cost of what's been documented, time, quality, safety, etc.
Sure. Thanks very much. Let's continue our look around. Okay, we're on level 2 now, and we're looking inside the building, just near the lift court. Adrian, let's have a look at what we can see up on the reflected ceiling here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brendan. So what you'll see up on the reflected ceiling is all our service runs. So generally the service trunkways are taken through all the corridors and then feed into each individual apartment. So we have a range of main electrical cables. So this is the main electrical cabinet riser, so that you can see where power reticulates. You can see the hot and cold water lines as they run through into each apartment, as well as data, etc. So what you'll find is that as we come through and sheet and start closing in, once we've done first fix services, which is getting all those service trunkways in place, the corridor will actually be the last area that we sheet, because that's where everything is fed from.
Just having a look at how all this works. There's obviously a huge coordination between many different trades. We've got a drawing here of a reflected ceiling plan. Adrian, do you want to just talk us through perhaps some of the different companies that work through, and then exactly what we can see on a plan like this?
Absolutely. So the main activity, the main reason this plan is here is for the ceiling and petitions crew that are working here at the moment. So each one of these towers has a separate contractor doing ceilings and petitions. So ultimately what this is picking up, so the different markings that you see here identify the different ceiling types and also ceiling levels that are throughout this floor plan. So this is set up here laminated, so that the guys that are working here, as well as having individual plans that they walk around and take with them, this will actually be their guide as to, through here it'll tell them there'll be so generally with drawings the whole idea is to be as clear as possible, as you can see, and then have annotations which then reference the schedule. If all of this information was on here, it'd start to get confusing. So what these little annotations mean is that you've got a guide there which has a number reference, which is BDCLO1. That means it's flush plasterboard. So flush plasterboard is obviously a sheet of this plasterboard, which is then coated so that it looks like it's full plaster. there's a number underneath it. That is actually telling what the RL is off the finish of the structure slab. So there will be other sets of plans. So on another plan, it will determine what these wall types are. One thing that's quite important with, effectively, this is multi-storey residential construction in its classification. So each of these walls here that divides apartments is actually a firewall. Fire separation is critical. So there will be another drawing similar to this for the walls, which will outline what all the wall types are. So it's very, very important with drawings to have the information that's specific to the particular trade. So working on this floor, there will be a sequence of up to, in finishes, once the structure's in place, of up to 30 trades. Each of those trades will have their own specific layout. So the electrical reticulation that you see coming up the main riser, just behind me here where we have our temporary board set up, that will be, they'll have electrical plans which will show the reticulation, which is the main trunkways, as well as then what you see here, which is the individual points for where the light fittings will end up plugging into, and GPOs, which are general purpose outlets, which are the power points in the room. Same thing with hydraulic, which is all the water service effectively, so hot and cold water. They'll have a plan which will pick up the main reticulation, that will also pick up gas, through to a layout which will show them exactly where the services need to terminate, where the tempering valves are, ensuring that the hot water doesn't get too hot, etc.
Fantastic. So I think you can appreciate the drawings are a really key, important part of the information for a project like this, as is the technical specifications and the contracts. But when you've got a job like this, Adrian, how many people have we got on site?
At this point in time, we've got 215 people just in Brighton Gs.
Okay.
So, and that would be across at the moment probably 40 different trade contracts.
Over there, we're actually on southwest of level 2 now. Adrian, do you want to take us through a little bit more of the structural form that we can see here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brendan. So the structural form that you're seeing here is actually what we call a reinforced concrete frame. So reinforced concrete frame means exactly that. So the foundation system here is CFA pipes, continuous splice auger pipes, which...
And that would be due to the ground conditions?
Ground conditions, yep. As we come up out of the ground, reinforced concrete frame is effectively formwork is set up. So false work is set up, which is actually timber boxes. A reinforcement cage goes in place, which is the reinforcing steel bars that you would normally see. Then we pour concrete, allow it to cure for a day or two, remove the temporary form. The plastic that you see here is actually for curing long term, particularly because we're by a coastal environment, which is quite aggressive. So that allows the concrete to cure
And does that
really well.
the concrete strength we need to use here, Adrian?
It does. So the concrete strength we've used here is generally a good 32 mix up to 40 MPa, which is a little bit more than what you'd have typically for projects of this type, again with the more aggressive marine environment. So cover means the distance between the outside and where your reinforcing bar sits is typically here slightly more. So the engineers have taken a more conservative approach, again because of the aggressive environment being right on the coast. The floor slabs themselves, and you see me standing on the concrete slab, they are a conventionally reinforced slab. So effectively, again, there was timber false work, and we actually used a formwork system, so a series of pans, so they're easy to erect and pull down. And you can see the soffit lining, which shows a very symmetrical arrangement.
So soffit, Adrian, being the underside of the slab?
Yeah, soffit being the underside of the slab, and you'll see a regular arrangement of lines sort of in the foot. That's actually showing you where the false work was, the form work that actually held that up. So you can see there were a series of pans. Again, on this project, it was conventionally reinforced, which means it's purely a steel reinforced deck. So a whole lot of steel reinforcement that goes in place. Again, I won't go into the details of how that's designed. Concrete's poured, and then the formwork's removed. What's really interesting though is that because this is a conventionally reinforced slab, the formwork has to stay in place a lot longer. So what it's meant for us is in a construction cycle, it's been a little bit slower because there's a series of temporary formwork that needs to remain in place longer than if this was a post-tension reinforced, or a post-tension slab.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are sort of some of the decisions? Obviously cost is one as to what type of structure you do. Why was this type of structural form chosen here?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. Ultimately, they were looking for, because this is a premium product, what they wanted was good deflection control. And again, because the footprint's not over large, one of the issues with post-tensioning is that it's more efficient when you have a greater effective length. So the longer that you've got for the post-tension strands to work, the more efficient they are. So here, when you look at the orientation of the building and the layout, with a central core that's there that takes the majority of lateral restraint of the building, it was actually a reasonably efficient, conventionally reinforced design. We actually, when we first priced the job, went for a post-tension option and gave an alternate design option, mainly because of the speed of construction would be slightly better. But ultimately, it's here, again, one thing that's interesting, and this goes back to the need of the job, for Minda, this is infrastructure that they own forever. So although people come and purchase the apartments here, they purchase it under retirement living, which is a licence to occupy. So again, Minda wanted the perceived stability and long-term serviceability that conventional reinforcement can potentially give you. Post-tensioning can do that too.
Yeah. It's a case of either would do the job.
Either would do the job, but it's client ultimately what they feel most comfortable with.
All right, behind you, Adrian, we've got something that looks like it's part of the facade. Do you want to talk us through that?
Absolutely. So the facade that's here, and as you see at the moment, I was talking earlier about the scaffold. So the scaffold steps in and out to provide a working access deck and platform for people to work and install the facade. These panels here are what we call curtain wall panels. So actually they're sliding doors, and there's some curtain wall panels in behind them. So these buildings of a residential nature are quite often a combination of different external finishes. So the panels that you see over here are a commercial grade external window and sliding door system, because this still has to work as an apartment, like someone's home.
Yes.
The section, so they're similar to what you'd have in your house, except spec to a very, very, very high standard to deal with the wind pressure and water pressure from being on the coast. Down along the side here, you can't pick it up on the camera, but there are little tags which pick up the structure for curtain wall. So curtain wall is pre-glazed glazed panels, which effectively go together like a Meccano set. No different to what you see in the city, or particularly in Melbourne and Sydney, a 50, 60 story commercial office building where you see a full glass wall. So we've got sections here that are continuous glass from top to bottom as a feature that are not openable, together with a more traditional opening sliding doors, openable windows, etc. for ventilation.
Yeah, sure. As we pan through the scaffolding, where you can see, Adrian, a key feature of the location of the Brighton Dunes development is that it's, by name, right on the dunes. This is a fantastic addition for Adelaide, in that you'll get some fantastic accommodation. There's also some sensitivities with building a construction project like this in this location. Do you want to talk us through perhaps some of the challenges you've had to face with the location being on the dunes?
Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Absolutely. I'll just step down and across the scaffold. So it's interesting as you look out across the dune landscape. This was actually the last remaining original set of dunes along the metropolitan foreshore. So effectively all the dunes that you see looking out here are protected. It's the last area between down to Cape Jervis all the way up to North Haven, that's the original dunes. So what we're looking at is actually a coastal protection zone. So what we've done, working in this area and its sensitivity, is a crucial part of our site management plan and process. So we had to go through and actually there's a line again on a drawing which demarcates the exclusion zone, as in what's the sensitive protection zone. There's then a zone that sits back in from that where you're allowed to work. The line there where you see our fence is an absolute no-go zone. So we're not allowed to do anything or touch the dunes that are outside of that, because they're obviously protected. When we constructed, you can see the down below. Again, I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up. Hopefully, yeah. There's actually a ballast road. That ballast road is just outside of the perimeter of the basement wall. So we actually had to get approval, even though we're in a workable zone, to still excavate within that area. So the challenge is, it's all about how, when you build, having lay down zones and areas where you can actually store materials and get access for materials, or get access for vehicles to deliver materials, and also build the facade, working in with not protruding into the environmental zone. So there was work that was also done in looking at batters for the basement construction, etc. Make sure you can go over.
This is proof that we're actually dealing with a live construction site.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're now on level 1, looking out to the west across to the beautiful St Vincent Gulf. Adrian, what I'd like to ask you here is your role as Chief Executive Officer of Sarah. What exactly do you do?
Okay, no, thank you, Brendan. So I'm responsible for Sarah Constructions. So ultimately, across all the projects that we do, the health and well-being of all our staff and everybody that operates on our sites. If there's any incidents, issues, etc., I'm ultimately personally responsible for all of that. So the majority of my work life is not spent sort of dressed like this on sites anymore. I started that way. So I actually started as an engineering graduate. I went through the course, did a civil engineering degree, worked as a designer for a very small period of time, and realised that construction was for me. And so I worked my way up through from a site engineer, project engineer, was a site manager on city projects, project manager, and then moved into executive management. So ultimately for me, it's about having vision for where we want to take the business, and a lot of my work is around customer relations. So, and also ensuring that we're looking after our people with everything from health and safety up to training, etc., that we're doing the right thing.
And I get the impression, Adrian, you enjoy what you do.
Absolutely, love it. Yeah. So, I wouldn't be here doing it otherwise. And that's one bit of advice I'd give everybody, is you've got to enjoy doing what you're doing. Yeah.
The beautiful thing about our industry and then the degree you're doing is there is some scope to move around in, and I'm the same. I absolutely love what I do, and wouldn't be here otherwise. But Adrian, we've got Ben with us. Do you want to introduce Ben and tell us what he does?
Absolutely. So I'll pass over to Ben to explain his role, but essentially, one of the big things for me with our business is constantly growing talent. And so we bring in 5 new graduates a year from various different backgrounds, from a combination of engineering and building. And ultimately, the plan for Ben is to ultimately sort of work his way through the business, get a bit of a different taste of the different areas and what we do, and the graduate program enables that, to then become one of our future stars. So I'll pass to Ben to talk more about his role.
Thanks, Adrian. So basically, I've come into Sarah Constructions about a month ago, so fairly new. Come in as a construction graduate, so I was doing construction management course. Ended up with a bachelor's out of that, and it's one of those things where I started off in engineering and sort of realised, and you've touched on, you've got to enjoy what you do. And for me, the individual elements and structural steel and that sort of thing, I didn't want to lock myself into learning about simple things. I like building as a whole. I like the services, the structure, the fit out, the finish. So for me, it was a slight change of pathway, but looking back on it now, it's like you have so many opportunities to get into the industry and into stuff like this.
Are you enjoying what you're doing, Ben? Do you like being on this sort of project as your first job?
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it's an amazing place to come to work. You know, we got the beach right there. We got, you know,
It won't always be this good.
yeah, that's true. But no, it's great, and we got so much going on, and there's so much to see and learn. You know, that just follows on from being at uni. You know, they give you a really good rundown of all the basics, and you know enough that you can come here and just build on that.
Do you want to give us a taste of what sort of things do you actually do day to day on this project?
Yeah, so on this project, obviously very new to the project, which has been going for a considerable amount of time before that. So I've come in and slowly taken on more and more roles. So as was touched on earlier, in a building like this, fire is a massive one. Fire walls, fire penetrations. So day to day I maintain a database. So obviously we've got 5 or 6 main trades that are running between the firewalls, so we've got to make sure that all the holes are sealed and stuff like that. So I maintain that. I work with the project coordinator and project manager. So
you report to them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do a lot of requests for information. Obviously, a building like this, some stuff gets missed in the documentation. Do a lot of that, a lot of meetings.
Okay, Ben, being on the coast and having this this construction literally right on the coast here, presents some challenges, particularly with things such as wind. Do you want to talk to us about the challenge of that and what you have to deal with, what you have to do to deal with the wind on this project?
Yeah, so obviously compared to lots of buildings, this, you know, wind is a massive factor on this one. And that sort of comes down to everything from, you know, wind pressure hitting the building elements and things like the windows, sliding doors, obviously waterproofing, water control is a massive issue that you face on a building like this when there is that wind pressure. And then it comes all the way back to real simple things you might not necessarily think of, like the tower crane.
Yep.
Once we go over 16 metres a second, that stops.
That stops?
That
Yeah.
stops.
I mean, it's an important point because, you know, particularly in design, which we do a lot of in this course, we're always thinking about, you know, what are the finished building design pressures that the building may have to withstand. But during construction can actually be some of the most challenging conditions that you have to, that this building may have to face in its lifetime. So, you know, the issues of, you know, how do you actually build this building, the use of a tower crane that sits up the top with a 70-metre boom or whatever that's got, you know, it's significant. And, you know, are there any other challenges, Ben, that you can think of that you've come across in the past month or so?
I guess one of, coming back to the windows, but that is one of the ones that keeps coming up, and it has to do with the way the design of the building is. Obviously, it's like, you know, aged care. You know, so architects in this sort of instance love level floors inside to out, which, you know, presents more problems with water and wind. As far as the building fabric goes, it's one of those things where the floors that don't have windows in, you know, if we have rain and really strong winds coming off the ocean, we can get water blown back 15 metres. You got plasterboard or things that get damaged when they get wet. You know,
You're trying to hit, you know, schedules, etc.
Yeah.
This could really throw you out, I expect.
yeah, no, it presents challenges for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Just some of the challenges that you may not think about that are really important, and this is where, you know, the guys at Sarah really earn their money. Okay, Adrian, we're now on the link bridge between the two towers. Do you want to give us a little bit of an overview of what we can see from here?
Absolutely, thank you, Brendan. So, right over to the side here is actually stage 1 of the Minda redevelopment. So these units are 3-level with a basement car park. These are actually in occupation. So these are being occupied by people that are over the age of 55 as independent retirement living. Down here in front of me is a leisure sort of complex, which stage 2 will link into. So effectively what we're doing is replicating what you see over there, but to a grander scale. So where they had sort of 2 buildings at 3 level, we've got 2, but 1 at 4 with a basement and 1 at 6 with a basement. What we can also see is obviously the tower crane.
Perhaps we'll come over and have a look at that one. Adrian, do you want to talk to us? We can obviously see the mast of the fixed hammerhead tower crane.
Absolutely. So what I spoke about before is that selection of crane is really important for your project. We selected a fixed arm crane, which is often called a hammerhead crane, again because they have a very, very long reach. So the boom on that is over 70 metres, I think it's 72 metres, which with 2 towers allows us to get to all parts of the project. The other good thing about the fixed arm cranes is that they're very well balanced. So the moment and reaction at the base is quite small, which means that they're easier to install. The tower sections are slender, and you don't need as many tie-backs back to the building to support the tower. So they're very well balanced. The cranes that you see that move up and down, they're called luffing cranes. They have a lot more, a greater reaction and greater moment at the base, which is often why you see them tied off to buildings.
We often find those types of cranes in town.
Absolutely.
A bit more
congested areas, yeah, absolutely.
The other type of crane that could be used is a mobile crane. Have you used mobiles at this site?
We have. So it's interesting when you're constructing a building. Obviously, cost efficiency comes in. So we would love to build these buildings with 3 cranes if we could, because we love cranes and it would build them quite quickly, but they're very expensive. So it's all about finding the best solution. The best solution here, most cost effective for time, was 1 fixed arm tower crane with some supplementary mobile craneage. So what that means is that there's mobile cranes that come in from time to time. Let's say we're doing flat out on structure and facade here. We'll be feeding this other tower for half a day and then disappear, and then maybe come back 2 or 3 days later to feed more materials to it, depending on what activities are occurring on the tower behind me.
So it's ultimately cost and schedule that govern.
Absolutely, and it's finding that best fit.
Yep.
Yeah. So we always run scenarios to challenge that, to work out, what's the best approach.
And that's, I guess, where you win and lose the jobs in some instances.
Absolutely, because in winning and losing these jobs, we're dealing with a margin. We're winning or losing a job is less than 1%, and so
wow.
It's fine-tuning your cost estimate and getting that right, particularly under this form of contracting, which is, lump sum, fixed lump sum model.
Yeah, for sure. It takes a lot of parties and different companies to do something like this. Adrian, do you want to talk us through some of the different companies involved and their roles in a project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. If you start at the top, so obviously you need a customer who has a need, which we spoke about before, who's Minda. What they've done is they've employed a group of designers, because it's a fixed lump sum delivery. They've fully documented this project before putting it out to tender. So they've selected an architect, they've selected a structural engineer and civil engineer, they've selected services engineers. So services engineers design all the electric, hydraulic, fire, etc. that you've heard us talk about. Structural engineers and civil engineers are pretty obvious, as well as then building certifiers, etc. They actually come through and do the documentation. When it comes to construction, they obviously select a contractor. We then select all the individual trades. So when we're pricing the job, we'll work through and we'll get pricing for, the reinforced concrete frame is broken down to a concreter. That's often broken down into supply and place. So as in buying the concrete as well as then the people to place it. Same with reinforcement, people to the supply of it, as well as then people to actually install it, running all the way through to the building trades, such as a lot of the plasterboard that we've seen, so the walling and ceiling contractors, services contractors, and then we'll have a look at in a moment at the finishes, such as cabinetry, joinery, tiling, white goods, etc. So,
how do you know when to use subcontractors when you think you can do tasks yourselves? I imagine that would be an important decision-making process.
Yeah, look, it is, and the way the contracting model works these days is that as a head contractor, there's very little work that we do ourselves. And it's a market-driven process, so it depends on how busy particular trades are. So say, for instance, here, the concreter actually supplied the concrete, placed the concrete. We did a deal with them where they actually supplied the reinforcement and placed the reinforcement as well. So it's always a matter of what's most efficient at the time in the market as to how you can package it up to get the efficiencies. And that depends on how all the subcontractors, where they're at, how busy they are. So even house builders these days will generally break down all of their all of the work into a series of trades. So if you rewind the clock back 40 years ago or 50 years ago, the Sarah business under sort of first generation management, they had 12 subcontracting entities that they owned. So they had their own bricklayers, they had their own electrical contractors. Yep, yeah, absolutely. Come through. No problem. It's a live construction site, as you can see. Had their own bricklayers, electricians, mechanical, as in air conditioning company, precast concrete, etc., etc. That's not done anymore, just for efficiency.
Ben, is there anything that you'd like to add from what you can see at this particular Porter site?
I guess one thing that pops up a lot on construction sites is just the logistics of setting stuff out. So obviously we've got 215 guys here that all need a bit of room.
One of whom you've just seen walk through the camera.
Yeah. So obviously things like bins, material storage, spaces for trades, and as we can see we've got scaffold around. That's another thing that takes a lot of planning and shuffling around as we progress through the building. We need to move and get into different areas.
Yeah, so I guess the scheduling and the planning is really where a company like Sarah would make a lot of money or lose a lot of money if the site becomes too crowded and everyone can't move.
Yeah, being adaptive is important, being able to change where to go and figure out the best way of going about that, in order to maintain programs and costs and keep the peace.
Fantastic. All right, there we have it from this part of site. We'll move on and show you.
Did you want to look at? I mean, they're saying that this is probably a good example of. Sorry, this is just what we were looking at before. This is another angle of where you see the external works gradually being finished off from top down. So they're the big, they're the big roof fins, which you can see in their finished form that we saw right up the top on level 6 being constructed. They've been built. They've come down another level. And they're now finishing off just under. So the scaffold will start coming down, and where Ben was talking about how important material handling is, that's where you see all these stillages that are on the ground, which are all in an organised format. They get filled and taken away straight away.
We're now on level 2 in apartment 2 of the eastern tower of the Minda redevelopment. Adrian, do you want to take us through something that looks like it's closer to finished than anywhere else we've been today?
Absolutely. What we're actually standing in is what we call our prototype apartment. So what we do is, if we're going to do any sort of medium to high density accommodation, so that is a number of apartments, we always bring one forward more earlier than anywhere else for two main reasons. One is to get the testing and ensure that the fit off of everything works right. So, and the designers, even though we've picked up this project under a fixed lump sum, which means everything's designed and identified where it needs to go, it's not until it's put together that some of the fine-tuning occurs, and Ben might be able to talk to us about some of those challenges. The other second really important aspect of it is it sets a quality benchmark that the rest of the job needs to be measured to. If you can imagine, there's almost 70 apartments here, and they're large, spacious apartments for retirement living, so people are paying reasonable money to come and live here. They'll have an expectation of quality. One of the challenges when you're in construction is what might be quality to yourself, Brendan, or myself, or Ben. We have a different expectation. So what we do is we actually set this as a benchmark for quality of finished product. Everybody agrees that's the case, and then if there's any issues with any other apartment going forward, it's then referenced back to here as a quality standard. So I might pass to Ben to talk about some of the specifics that are here.
So basically, this is our most advanced apartment. Currently, right at the finishing up stage. So we've got majority of joinery through. This is what we call second fix electrical, plumbing, and you know we can see the final mechanical is in. The other advantage that a prototype apartment has, you know, as far as setting standard for quality, is the first opportunity for some of these finishing trades to actually get in and have a go at their work. So it gives them a chance to figure out things that they could potentially be doing better, save them time on the next 71 apartments. You know, we can see how the joinery lines up with the electrical, lines up with, you know, appliances, and we can sort of fine tune all those things and
good chance to see if it all works.
Yeah, and just come up with the best way to go forward, you know, avoid any, you know, potential issues we may have come across on this one.
I guess it's good for the client too to actually see something that's close to being finished.
Yeah, no, it is. Definitely. And it gives them a chance, you know, the architect and the client, to come in and, you know, at this stage go, you know, we really like this, or we want to maybe look at doing that a little bit different, without, you know, having to come back and redo a whole lot of work, which is a good thing.
No worries. Thank you very much. Okay, we've now walked through both the western and the eastern towers, and this basically gives us a bit of an overview of where we've just been. You can see the tower crane in the background. Adrian, how's the project going, and what is there still to do before the project finishes up?
Okay, yeah, thank you, Brendan. So, yeah, look, the project's going well. Where we're at the moment is, so we started off in the western tower up on level 6, which is where you see that loading bay sort of jutting out of the side. So, we're working through that western building well into the process of plasterboard, or first fix services are in, plasterboard is, and so the drywalling and ceilings are going in. And on that tower, we're not far off of bringing the tilers and joiners in to then follow in behind. The tower behind me, as you can see, the scaffold's already started coming down. External works are well progressed. Most of the tower behind me, the plasterboard contractors are getting near their end. And as we saw from the last apartment that we're in, which was our prototype, we've got tiling going through, and then joinery not far behind once they get through the prototype. So we've got a few more months' work here. This part of the project comes together very, very quickly now. So particularly with having the resources that we have on site now, concentrated in the areas in a sequence that Ben was talking about before, how you ensure that trade by trade follows each other through in almost a manufacturing type process now.
Fantastic. I think it's been a great opportunity to see the project at this time with so many different trades and people on site. And I think what we'd now like to do is just sort of see how this the two towers interface with the rest of the Minda site here at Brighton. So we might have a quick look at Minda.
Absolutely.
On our way out today. All right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we're now over in what's called the lifestyle precinct of the Minda redevelopment. You can see the big tower crane behind me where we were before. And I'll join Adrian over here. Adrian, can you talk us about the lifestyle precinct of the project and what this entails?
Absolutely. So again, the lifestyle precinct that we see here, so these buildings, these single level buildings that have the dark brick and dark roof, are where Minda run their day programs. So day programs are where they have residents here that come in and learn, you know, do craft, cooking, learn other life skills. These Minda also have intellectually disabled that live off-site that come and do activities here, and people with disabilities that come and do other activities through this area. So it's for Minda residents as well as people that come and work on Minda program.
For sure. And obviously all these buildings that we can see around as we zoom around sort of 360, most of them that you can see in this shot are new. They were all part of this project?
They were, Brendan. So effectively when the flag dropped to start the project here, all buildings started at the same time. So these buildings being sort of smaller scale, sort of like small commercial, we could obviously finish earlier, which worked in well, which is what Minda needed. Also the Minda accommodation, so this is the medium density robust accommodation I was talking about for their residents. So what Minda are going through, because this is a 100-acre property that runs all the way from Brighton High School, which you can hear in the distance with having a sports day, all the way through to the ocean front. They need to accommodate residents through various precincts. So what you see behind me is the new built are 2 accommodation blocks, which are specifically designed and built to suit people with disability. We've actually built another 2 of those behind the trees, behind the lifestyle buildings that are there. We've also built some specific housing which you can't quite see, which is sitting again behind these buildings.
Fantastic. Now, where I'm standing is sort of an access road. Can you talk to us about the need for this access road that perhaps, I'm guessing, wasn't here before you guys were?
Absolutely. So one of the, when you spoke earlier about challenges, probably the biggest challenge for us working in an area like this is how do we work around existing residents in a sensitive environment and people that sort of with intellectual disability that need to navigate from area to area. So the sort of buildings that you see behind you that have been decommissioned, when we started building the lifestyle buildings here, they were actually in use. So we had a situation where we've got to get materials down to the Brighton Dunes Towers at the end. We've got residents who live across the other side of the site, needing to traverse to these old activities buildings, old lifestyle buildings. At the same time, we're amongst Somerton Park, Brighton, so a lot of the sort of suburban streets can't take vehicular traffic. So the biggest challenge, and what we set up here, was actually a main trunkway, so a temporary road that went right through the site to deliver materials to Brighton Dunes. What it also did was it demarcated the areas that Minda were using, and we actually had designated zones where we had manned crossings. So what we'd do is we'd have a person at that crossing, and consequently, if a Minda resident needed to get from one side to the other, as you can see, the temporary fencing's still in place. They weren't able to come through that fencing, they had to go to a designated crossing. So to use the lifestyle buildings behind us before the new ones came in, that's exactly what they were doing. Very, very important. One of the big challenges for construction always is, and Ben touched on it before, logistics, getting materials to the workforce, getting them installed and removing rubbish and materials and temporary works. So this trunkway has been the main spine through this 100-acre site, sensitive environment, to get materials in and out.
Yep, it basically demarcates you from the rest of the Minda site and therefore eliminates what could otherwise have been a fairly big workplace health and safety issue.
Absolutely, because if you can imagine, and we face this regularly whether you're working in health, education, schools, but if you're working in these sorts of precincts, and here's no different, people with disability and intellectual disability are really interested with what we're doing. So the challenge is that that demarcation is critical, where we've got to have it so it doesn't affect productivity, because we know that the residents that are here are going to kind of come up and stand by the fences and be very interested in what we're doing. One of the other big challenges is workplace health and safety. So it's that relationship not just with the stakeholders, so the existing Minda residents, but how we make sure the men and materials that are working on the job can move around efficiently as well. So what this trunkway allows us to do is it allows us to get materials through the job where not only Minda residents are affected and controlled, but our workforce isn't based here, as you can see. They had amenities in separate areas. They use the designated walkways as well, so that we don't have issues where you've got people trying to move, where vehicles are moving, articulated vehicles are moving, etc. Particularly when we're doing heavy activities such as doing the bulk earthworks to dig out the basement for Brighton Dunes. So one thing that's been fantastic the team's done here is we haven't had a lost time injury since the start of the job, and it's these sorts of strategies about managing logistics, people, vehicular movements, how you're handling with cranes, external scaffolds, etc. It's all those strategies that if you make it easy for people to work and people enjoy coming to work, then the rate of injuries drop.
Excellent. Okay, this brings our site tour in 360 to a close. Adrian, thank you very much for your help in showing us around the Minda redevelopment. Any final words?
No, look, thank you, Brendan. And look, I hope you all enjoy a taste of what this great industry is. You know, enjoy your course. You know, the career options for you at the end of it are absolutely fantastic. So, great big world out there for you when you finish up, and yeah, exciting career prospects. So, yeah, thank you. Hope you enjoyed as much as we did doing it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Adrian.